So during a regular day, how many meteorologists do you usually have in here?
We always have at least 2 meteorologists on duty around the clock, the public and the aviation forecasters, like we mentioned earlier. On weekdays, though, there'll be other, for example, those of us on the management team will be in working regular, kind of business hours. But there's always at least 2 forecasters on duty. But again, more people during the weekday daytimes, and again, if we're expecting a significant severe weather event, we may call in extra people as well, people that were scheduled to be off duty, or hold over people that were scheduled to get off at a certain time, to make sure we have enough people to handle the routine activities plus the warning activity that would take place as well.
Okay, so do you guys work for the federal government, or?
Yeah, we are federal government. We're actually part of the Department of Commerce, which some people are kind of surprised about. They might expect us to be with the Interior or Homeland Security, for example. But weather plays a huge role in the nation's economy, transportation, agriculture, and the like. And because of the effect on commerce, we were actually placed under the Department of Commerce. All right, well, this is our operations area, and we have a total of 24 people on staff here, and we always have at least 2 people on duty around the clock. Our main backbone computer system is the clusters of the flat screens that you see scattered around the operations area. That's a system called AWIPS, which stands for the Advanced Weather Interactive Processing System. Quite a mouthful there. But using the AWIPS system gives us access to all the data and all the information that we would need to do our jobs. Surface and upper air weather observations, radar and satellite imagery, output from the computer models as well. Plus we use these, some software within these workstations to actually prepare the forecasts and prepare the warnings when it's time to issue them. All right, now most of the day-to-day forecasting operations is done at these 2 workstations here. Over here on the left is our public forecast workstation, and this is where the forecasts are produced that you see on the internet if you click onto our web page. Also, if you read our forecast discussions, this is the forecast that produces the majority of those. Plus, this is all the information that, of course, goes to the TV meteorologists, the commercial TV meteorologists, for preparing their forecasts as well. So this forecaster will actually manipulate gridded and graphical fields of the forecast data: high temperature, low temperature, wind speed, wind direction, sky cover, rain chance. Manipulate these graphical fields, and when we get the graphical fields the way we want them, we then will take that data, stuff all that gridded data into these programs called product formatters, and then out from that will come the worded forecast, the old zone forecast that we still produce. Also, it will produce the forecast in graphical format, which goes onto our web page as well, for those that like to see pictures instead of read words. Then over here on the right is our aviation and fire weather workstation. And while the public forecaster is focusing over a 7-day period and generally looking at kind of the broad picture, using general terms as far as the forecasting goes, the aviation forecaster has a much different challenge. The aviation forecaster prepares detailed airport terminal forecasts for 4 of the bigger airports in our area: Memphis International, Jackson, Jonesboro, and Tupelo airports. And while the public forecaster could say maybe mostly cloudy with patchy fog, for example, as a forecast, the aviation forecaster has to be much more precise as far as ceiling heights, cloud heights, visibility, wind speed, wind direction. Generally speaking, the worse the weather conditions, the more precise the forecast has to be, because the pilots need to know if it's going to be safe to take off or land at that airport, if they're going to need to use alternate airports when they file their flight plans and the like. So they need that very precise, very detailed information. This forecaster will also prepare a fire weather planning forecast twice a day with parameters that are really specific for the firefighting community. Maximum and minimum relative humidity, lightning activity, something called mixing height, basically how high would a smoke column go before it starts to get blown out of the area. So again, a lot of parameters that would be important for the fire, in particular the wildfire community, to help plan out their operations.
So how many times a day does it push out warning or weather information to the airports?
At least 4 times a day. Every 6 hours we produce a new set of these terminal forecasts. However, when conditions change, we would, in particular, like going from VFR to MVFR flight rules, for example, or for other criteria, we would have to amend or update the forecast to reflect those changes. So at least 4 times a day, but during really bad conditions or rapidly changing weather conditions, many more times than that. The updated forecast will be going out.
Okay, so you guys send that to the airport, and then does the airport send it out to all the incoming planes? Or?
Yeah, it actually goes from our office to a central server where all of our forecast information is stored and disseminated, and then yeah, it would go, for example, to the tower, the approach control, also to the flight briefing services. They would be able to brief the pilots that were getting ready to take off and go on a particular flight. So basically, we get disseminated well throughout the entire aviation community.
Okay.
And over here, we have our public service workstation. The public service station is staffed 16 hours a day, whereas the forecasters are staffed 24 hours a day. The main duty of the public service position is to prepare and produce some of the information that the forecasters either can't do or don't have time to do. The public service person will prepare a lot of the daily and monthly climate and weather summaries for Memphis and some of the other larger cities in the area. We'll also spend a lot of time monitoring the river stages and taking the information in the forecast that we get from our river forecast centers and broadcasting or disseminating that information out in actual forecast products. So for example, back in July when we had all the rain and the Mississippi River came up, those forecasts actually came from the River Center in Slidell, Louisiana, but it was up to us to actually get that information out to the public and to the emergency officials and the other key partners in the area. This person will also oftentimes monitor our social media traffic, either Facebook posts or tweets that we've put out, and also monitor for reports we might get through social media, in particular during times of hazardous weather. This person will also be responsible for monitoring the radar, the Doppler radar, to make sure that it's operating properly and in the scanning strategy that we would need for the situation, if it's clear weather or stormy or snow or whatever we might be expecting. And this person will also monitor our weather radio broadcasts. So we have about 10 weather radio transmitters across the area, and if one of those has a problem, we get an alarm here, and the person will then have to contact maintenance. Also just monitoring to make sure that the broadcast, the content that's going out, is current and up to date as well.
And how would all this data get into the local office? Can you guys control the weather satellites up in space? Yeah,
the data that we get here comes from a variety of sources. We have automated surface observing equipment at a number of the airports, besides just the ones we produce the forecasts for, that send us the observations in many cases several times an hour. Of course, we have our radar at Millington that we talked about earlier, but we also have access to other radars in the area as well, Columbus Air Force Base, the Little Rock radar, the Jackson, Mississippi radar, Paducah, Kentucky, for example. And that all comes in through the high-speed communications lines that we have. The satellite data will also come in through those communications lines, and typically we do not control the satellites from here. We can request through the National Control Center near Washington, D.C., if we need a special scanning strategy from the radar, something called rapid scan, which would give us images even more quickly than we currently get, every few minutes actually. But that's again really controlled by the central facility outside of Washington, D.C. And then the computer model data that we get, the output from our computer models, which is some of our primary guidance when we're making the forecasts. Those computer models are generated at a massive computing facility, again outside of Washington, D.C., and then distributed to us and all the other weather offices across the country. Plus, they'll make that model data available on their website and other web pages as well.
And you guys also have access to the airport radar sites?
Yes, there are, in addition to our weather radars, there are smaller radars called terminal Doppler weather radars. You might see the one on I-55 down in DeSoto County if you travel south out of the Memphis area. Those radars are Doppler radars. They're really designed more for looking for microbursts and wind shears right around the immediate airport vicinity. But we do have access to those radars as well, and we'll integrate them into our scanning and our observing strategies as well. This is the control monitor basically for the Memphis Doppler weather radar, which is actually up near Millington. And using this, we can set what scanning strategy is in, how fast the radar rotates, how high up it tilts, and depending on which strategy we're in, that is where we would activate the sails scan. You can see right now it's listed as inactive because we're not in a storm scanning strategy. If we switch to one of our storm-based scanning strategies, then sails would become active, and then we'd start getting those low-level slices about every 2 minutes or so instead of every 4.5 minutes.
So on average, how long does it take to get an average sweep of?
Well, when we're in what's called clear air mode, which we are now, the radar rotates much slower, lower power, and we complete a volume scan, one of these elevation tilt sequences, about every 10 minutes or so. When we switch to storm mode, though, the mode that we typically use when we have thunderstorms in the area, it's about 4.5 minutes to do the full three-dimensional scan. But again, we'll have a supplemental low-level slice, that sails slice, that about halfway through it'll come back down and do that. So about every 2 minutes we're getting a low-level slice then.
Okay, and then that data runs into AWIMPs, and then
yeah, into AWIPS, and of course out through the radar dissemination services out to the world as well. So this is the actual weather radio console. Again, we have about 10 transmitters across the Mid-South. We used to have human broadcasters. That was another job of the public service people, was to record manually the forecast, the observations, the watches, and the warnings on the weather radio. About probably 12 years or so ago, though, we went to an automated system that basically takes, whenever we transmit something, it automatically goes into this system. There's some coded information in the header of whatever we put out that says what type of forecast or watch or warning it is, for which areas is it in effect, and for how long is it valid. The computer software in here will then figure out which transmitters it needs to go on, and if it is, say, a watch or a warning, we'll actually transmit some special alarm codes that will activate the alarms on those weather radio receivers. It'll take the text, convert it into speech, and then get it out over the air all within a few seconds after the forecasters or the meteorologists transmitting that information.
So if the computer were to mess up, can you guys still speak into it so the information goes out?
We still can. If we have a partial failure, then we do have headphones and microphone so that we can make backup broadcasts if we need to. And we also can use the buttons up here to manually generate those alarm codes that would go out. Fortunately, it doesn't happen very much because we do have two redundant systems that run the weather radio programming. But if need be, then we could go and do some of the process manually. Now, back in the old days of weather radio, when we would send out those alarm codes, it would basically activate every alarm, every radio within range of that transmitter site, which in some cases could be a maybe 30 or 40 mile radius around the transmitter site. So we were doing a lot of overwarning, activating people's alarms when maybe the storm was a couple of counties away from them and moving away from them if they weren't really going to be threatened. Well, we went to a system called S.A.M.E, S-A-M-E, the Specific Area Message Encoder, which basically, and that's some of the coded information that goes out before when the broadcast goes out. We can actually get it down now to the county level. So, for example, with the newer weather radios, pretty much all the weather radio receivers now, you can program which counties you want the radio to alarm for. So if you're here in Shelby County, you can program the radio to alarm only for watches and warnings for Shelby County. You would not then get alerted for Fayette or Tipton or DeSoto County watches and warnings. So it helps to reduce some of that overwarning that was taking place.
A severe thunderstorm was located near Fraser or near Bartlett, moving northeast at 60 miles per hour. Hazard, 60 miles per hour wind gusts and quarter-size hail. Source, radar indicated. Impact, hail damage to vehicles is expected. Expect wind damage to roofs, siding increase. This severe thunderstorm will be near Bartlett, Cordova, and Ellendale around 3:55 p.m. Central Standard Time.
And just to make sure that we're clear on one thing, the weather radio alarms that we're talking about only activate the alarms on the receivers themselves. The warning sirens are actually activated by local emergency management officials in the cities or the counties. So they're looking at our information. In many cases, they're in touch with us as far as what we're seeing and what we think is going on with the storm, but it's actually up to the local emergency management officials to actually activate the sirens for their areas.
I'm here with Jelly Thompson here in the Germantown 911 Center, and this is where you guys set off the tornado sirens.
Correct, yes.
So what are we looking at over here?
So we use a federal siren system, and this is the console which they use to activate it. If you can see, it says Civil Defense, Tornado, and Saturday test, because we test our sirens every Saturday at noon.
Okay, so if Germantown were to be placed under a tornado warning, they would just have to press that button.
They would simply mouse over and press that button, and they sound for 3.5 minutes, and then they reset, and they click on them every 3.5 minutes to keep them going.
Okay, and can you guys set off a few particular sirens if it's on the west side of Germantown?
We can actually go into the map and set off individual sirens. We have a map. Where did I move them out? We have a map that we can go in and pick individual sirens, but we usually set off the whole city.
Okay, and how do you guys know if Germantown's under a tornado
The
warning?
National Weather Service issues a polygon warning, and if it comes inside the city limits is the only time Germantown sets off their sirens under a new directive from a couple of years ago. So we don't set it off if it's in Millington or Bartlett, only if it comes into Germantown or in the vicinity.
So do they have a weather radio here that gives them the notification?
Actually, they watch a weather map up here from Earthworks, and that's where they get their notification from. The polygons pop up there as quick as they come across the weather radio.
Okay. So the EAS alerts that someone would get on their cell phone, are those sent out from that computer? Or?
Those another great question. Those are actually not done from this computer. The WEA, it's called, Wireless Emergency Alert, that really obnoxious whistling sound, and then the text or the message that pops up on your smartphone. That's actually a FEMA and Department of Homeland Security initiative. We obviously have worked with them to make sure that they're getting the warning information, but that's actually FEMA and Homeland Security that runs that system. Yeah, this is amateur radio equipment. We actually have several amateur radio sets here. And a lot of the storm spotters that we use are amateur radio operators. Amateur radio is a great, robust communication system, and a lot of the ham radio operators pride themselves on being able to operate when commercial power is down, when cell phone towers are down, they're still able to communicate. So a lot of the storm spotters, again, are amateur radio operators. Sometimes we'll actually have one or more operators here talking directly. In other times, the net controllers for the spotter groups will be in our secure chat room, and so they'll be relaying reports to us that way. But again, we're still very, very dependent on the ham radio spotters as some of our best trained eyes in the field, looking and reporting visually what they're seeing, and we can combine that with our radar data to give us the best picture of what the storms are really doing. The ham radio operators will also be very important if we were to have a major incident, Lord forbid an earthquake here in the area, where communications may be disrupted for many days. We would have the ham radio operators in here using this rig in particular to do long distance communication with our regional headquarters in Fort Worth, for example, providing status updates and continuity type operations. So yeah, the ham radio operators are really an important part of the team. Again, not only during severe weather, but potentially during a post-disaster incident as well.
So say if the power were to go out at the office, do you guys have a backup generator to?
Yeah, backup is a popular topic when folks come out to visit us because they want to know what we do. We do have a generator, and we have an uninterruptible power source, or UPS, that will keep all the critical systems running until the generator kicks in and comes up and is ready to take over. So we do have a generator for all of our backup facilities. People also ask sometimes what happens if the office goes down, if our computers fail or we have a communications failure. And in those cases, we do have backups already set up. The Little Rock office is our primary backup, and we are their primary backup. And then Nashville is our secondary backup. So if we had a problem, they have all of our files. They could basically bring up one of their AWIPS workstations as though they were the Memphis office, and we could do the same with theirs. And then if we get into a really serious situation, we would transfer the warning responsibility as well. If we had to take shelter, we would actually go downstairs into one of the rooms down in the lower level, the basement part of the Agri Center here.
Okay, so if the office was under a warning and it looked like a pretty good chance it would get hit, you guys would leave the office and transfer?
Yeah, we would transfer the forecast and warning responsibility to one of the backup offices, probably Little Rock, and then take care of ourselves, but then as quickly as possible get back up here so we could take the warning operations back over.
Thank you for taking your time out of your busy day to show me around the Weather Service Center.
Oh, you're welcome, Finnegan. Thank you for coming out, and thanks for helping tell the story of what we do here and how we help keep folks here in the Mid-South safe.
Thank you. This is Finnegan Gruggett with Germantown Municipal Television.